Hello, everyone. Um on behalf of the Executive Committee of the Alumni Association of Center for Social Medicine and Community Health, JMU, I welcome you all to this third lecture in this lecture series that we have initiated. This is part of the CSMCH 50th Foundation year that we are celebrating, 22-23. And as I mentioned, this is the third lecture by Dr. Gopal Krishna, and it seems to be his looks like his talk is going to be a very informative and enriching one, and several of us have been looking forward to it. So I will now hand over to uh, Edward Pinto, another alumni of ours, to introduce the speaker and moderate the discussion. As Eddie mentioned just now, after Dr. Gopal Krishna's talk, we will have a discussion. Uh, uh, so we look forward to this. Over to you, Eddie.
Yeah, thank you, Indira. Uh, so welcome, and it's nice to see a number of people present to this talk. So let me just briefly introduce Dr. Gopal. Dr. Gopal Krishna is a law and policy researcher, lawyer and bilingual writer on occupational health, interstate migrants, disarmament, peace, big data, citizenship, ecocide, hazardous waste trade, and data justice. So Dr. Krishna has substantially contributed to environmental justice. His efforts against biomass burning led to the stoppage of at least half a dozen hazardous waste incinerators technology-based projects, which were masquerading as carbon trade projects across the country. Few years back, he played a role in the matter of waste crisis in Jalandhar. He's also been a petitioner in the Supreme Court against dumping of foreign hazardous waste, end of life ships in Indian waters, and in the India and National Green Tribunal in the matter of Ganga Waterway project. In addition, we are glad to know his campaign to make India asbestos free uh, had a great consequence and due to its relentless advocacy. And India's 7,349 stations were being made asbestos free by the government of India. So he has several papers, international talks, and solid research that adds to his depth of the subject, which makes today's day quite interesting. Coming to today's lecture, corporate crimes, public institutions and their accountability, an inquiry into the Gopal Krishna did his PhD from JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University. His thesis is on corporate crimes, public institutions and their accountability, an inquiry into the industrial disaster of Bhopal. He has formerly studied law, philosophy, and mass communication. Since 2019, he has been a fellow of Berlin-based International Research Group on Authoritarianism and Counter Strategies. He has been a guest fellow, Faculty of Law, Humboldt University, Berlin, and as a postdoctoral fellow of Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, Berlin. He has also been a postdoctoral fellow at Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Coming to today's talk, which is a unique topic by itself, for database state, decoding the implications of unending census. This talk will dwell on the journey of the census and its sister databases, the convergence and the state's effort to classify valids and invalids. It will examine the dominant narrative which persuades people to think that they're having nothing to fear after trusting their personal sensitive information to a database state. It will also interrogate the maxim, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. This was articulated by Joseph Goebbels, propaganda minister of Nazi Germany. The big database driven state actors will have citizens believe that the idea of big database is linked to the concepts of inclusion, cooperation, partnership, and consultation. Some critical questions that are at the heart of today's discussion include: will the marriage of statistics of biological attributes and identification technology with digital sculpture alter the relationship between the citizen and the state? So there are many more questions that are, which are critically placed at this stage around the concept of big data. So I would welcome, thank you, Dr. Gopal, for making time and for agreeing to be the main speaker today at this our lecture series. And over to you. And I am sure it will be a very fruitful, and very informative discussion that we will have in the coming 1 hour. So we have about 45 minutes. Meanwhile, please keep your questions reserved. Maybe you can put in the chat box if you want. Then we can put them together, and we will have a moderated discussion after the talk. Yeah, over to you, Dr. Gopal. Lakshmi, maybe we can now remove the what to say the this one. Yeah, thanks. Dr. Gopal.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Dr. Premdas. Thank you. Uh, Thank you for inviting me to speak on this subject and agree to let me speak on this subject. I will begin with a quotation from George Patton, who was the US general during the Second World War. And after the defeat of Nazi Germany, he was the military governor of Bavaria, a state in Germany. George Patton said, if everyone is thinking alike, someone isn't thinking. If everyone is thinking about database in a similar way, then it seems there are people who are not thinking about database critically. George Patton was reminded uh, post the defeat of Nazi Germany. He said that in a letter to his wife, he said that during the war he was never told that the war was about denazifying Germany.
Profile.
So, am I audible?
Yeah, you are. Yes.
Yeah. So, in the beginning of my talk about this journey of the databases, I would like to first introduce three kinds of data. Two kinds of data most of us are familiar with: demographic data, biometric data, and metadata. We all know what demographic data is. We also by now know what biometric data is, which includes fingerprints, iris scan, voice print, and DNA, and other biological attributes. So I will focus primarily on biometric data and metadata. But before I do that, I want to just place it in a context that in the pre-colonial and colonial India, there was absence of individual registration system. Colonial government counted and recorded almost everything. They recorded people, property, natural resources. But they confined themselves with regard to people. They confined themselves to counting and recording the aggregates, not individual registration. It was only after independence that the efforts to register individuals began. And it has come a long way. That effort to register every individual it has come a long way. But I would like to go in a chronological manner to cover the journey of the entire database creation. in India, the database creation actually commenced. It's from times immemorial. The empires and the kingdoms and the kings have counted people. They have done head counting of people. But the systematic manner of collecting data in modern times began in India in 1824 when Allahabad city was, the consensus operations were conducted in Allahabad city. Allahabad is important because after the defeat of Battle of Buxar in 1764, a Treaty of Allahabad was signed in 1765, and it had become a very important moment in the colonial rule. So in 1824, Allahabad city census happened. In 1828, Banaras census happened. In 1830, Dhaka census happened. During 1851-52, there was stock taking of people in Madras. And in 1856, the Home Department of East India Company government ordered general census of India. But that census could not be taken up because of the first freedom struggle, the 1857 struggle, first war of India's independence commenced. And therefore, what happened was that although East India Company's Home Department wanted census operations to commence during between 1857 and 59, it could not happen. It was postponed. But in that very period, in 1855, census of Punjab was done. Subsequently, in 1865, Home Department again expressed its desire to have a general census. So subsequently, there was census of Awadh in 1869. There was census of Madras in 1863. Census of Bombay in 1864. Census of Calcutta in 1866. Why this backdrop is important? Because it is in this backdrop that the effort to have first systematic general census of the country began. So this general census began actually during 1866-67 and it was concluded in 1872. So in a way, the first census happened in 1870, was concluded in 1872, but it is not considered the first census because it was non-synchronous. The first synchronous census happened in 1881, and subsequently the efforts after every 10 years have been unfolding. Every 10 years census have been conducted in our country. But before I proceed further in a chronological manner, I want to just remind the friends who have joined us to listen to this conversation that the first census in USA happened in 1790. And in 1890, the US census was done using the punch card technology of International Business Machine, which is now called IBM. And the first census in USSR happened in 1926. And in 1936, Germany bought IBM from the US, or their subsidiary started operating in Germany for census operations. This was in 1930s in Germany. I will come back to this German moment a little later. But what happened in India was that after the German acquisition of the IBM machine for census, the census operations were conducted in the pre-Nazi Germany. And while conducting the census, the IBM company marked all these Jews in their census. And when Nazi party came to power, that database with profiling of Jews was handed over to the Nazi party government in Germany. That database contributed to the Holocaust. There is an author who has written a book called IBM and the Holocaust. and he wanted to be objective in his assessment of what IBM did. So after gathering the narrative about IBM's role in the Holocaust, in the concentration camp, he reached, the author of that book, IBM in the Holocaust, reached out to the IBM officials to take their version as to what they have to say with regard to the allegation that IBM was complicit in the Holocaust, in the concentration camp. The IBM responded to the question of their complicity by saying that their German subsidiary had become out of control, and this reply reveals that IBM did not dispute their complicity in the Holocaust, in the concentration camp. The census operations, this began, was clearly linked to uh, a genocide, and it is properly documented. In fact, in the Washington DC Holocaust Museum, the IBM punch card machine is kept as a reminder of the role such census technologies can play. So the reason I remember that moment is because by 1945 it was clear that data, or population level data, demographic data, can be put to violent use, can be put to for genocidal purposes, can be used for genocidal purposes. The reason I mention this in 1945 date is important because while the census operations in India were going on since, at least formally, since 1881, it was only in 1948 that the Census Act was enacted. The Census Act 1948 has a section 15, which says that the data which is collected during census will not be shared with anybody, even on the orders of any court of India. So the Census Act was sensitive to how census was misused in Germany. This is also important because in US also a similar provision existed in their law, but during Second World War that provision was suspended, and the data of individuals of German descent or of the allies of the Germany, they were identified. So, yeah, thank you for mentioning the name of the author of the book IBM on the Holocaust. He was Edwin Black. So, Edwin Black has established through his research the role of the IBM. And I will come back to the role of IBM again because it is still relevant. But the Census Act of 1948 is important also because the Census Commissioner conducts census in India. Since 1951 till 2011, it is the Census Commissioner who has been conducting the census operations, and says Act implementation of the census, that it was the Home Department of East India government which wanted general census of the entire country. The 1948 Act is important to recollect, and I'll come back to it again. Subsequent to 1948, the next census happened in 1961 in the post-independent India. And the third census in the post-independent India happened in 1971. Between 1961 and 1971, there was an act which was enacted, which we all know, and most recently that act has been amended in August, which is the Birth and Death Registration Act 1969. And an amendment has been made in that act. I will talk about that amendment little later and how it is relevant. It is also important to remember that this act Birth and Death Registration Act is also implemented by Ministry of Home Affairs. Before moving further, in between 1948 and 1969, there was another act enacted, and that was Citizenship Act of 1955. That is also implemented by Ministry of Home Affairs. So data related 3 acts are implemented by Ministry of Home Affairs. First is Census Act, second is Citizenship Act 1955, third one is Birth and Death Registration Act 1969, which has just been amended. The Citizenship Act was amended in the year 2004 and the rules were notified under that act. But before the amendment of the Citizenship Act in 2004, the census of 2001 had happened, and in 2001, when the census was conducted, there were 21 questions which were asked in the schedule, the census schedule. And the last census which happened in 2011, there were 25 questions which were asked. I will come back to maybe during the question answer with regard to the importance of the questions, because in the first census there used to be 13 questions, and subsequently there were 17 questions in the schedule, and then there were 21 questions, and the number of inquiry or a very close observation of the population has been unfolding. But one important thing which is relevant for this talk is that in 2004, when the Citizenship Act was amended, there was a provision made for Registrar General of India to create National Population Register. This National Population Register is under the Citizenship Act, and the Registrar General who is responsible for conducting National Population Register is actually the Census Commissioner. The Census Commissioner is ex officio the Registrar General of National Population Register. So I want to underline this point, because in 2006, when the world's biggest biometric database was conceived in the form of biometric database or demographic database, which is the biggest database in the history of humankind. So that database, the conversation regarding that database commenced in the Planning Commission. In 2006, the Planning Commission had a processes committee under the chairmanship of Arvind Vermani. And this processes committee hired the services of Wipro as a consultant to create a vision document for unique identification of the BPL people. Subsequently, Wipro prepared the vision document for the Unique Identification Authority of India. The UID project, which is branded as Aadhaar project, actually commenced in 2006 itself, although formally it was launched in 2000. It was notified in 2009, in January 2009. The notification of Planning Commission dated 20th January 2009 is very revealing, because this notification reveals that National Population Register under the Citizenship Act 1955, as amended in 2004, and Aadhaar, Unique Identification Number, both the projects are same, because the notification says that the data collected under Aadhaar Act and the data collected under Citizenship Act, they will be collated, they will be conversed. So this project from the design stage itself was NPR, National Population Register, and the Aadhaar database is one and the same database, and the notification says in bracket that this is as per approved strategy. So the approved strategy was that NPR will be conducted by Home Ministry and the Aadhaar will be conducted by under Planning Commission. And now that entity Unique Identification Authority of India has moved to Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. So this was the moment of the arrival of humankind's biggest database. This moment is the moment of 2009 when the notification was made. The Aadhaar number project was formally launched in September 2010. And now I will move quickly year by year and I will cover many other aspects of it during question answer session. But in 2010, when it was launched, at that time there was no act of parliament which permitted collection of biometric data. In fact, there was one Identification of Prisoner Act 1920, which allowed biometric data collection of prisoners if there was a warrant from a judicial officer. And that had to be destroyed on acquittal of the prisoner or on after completion of the sentence of any convict of the convict. But with regard to biometric identification data for Aadhaar and for NPR, the data collected is not going to be destroyed ever at any point of time. In any case, electronic data cannot be destroyed. It will be stored for eternity. In 2010 and between 2010 and 11, this entity, Unique Identification Authority of India, signed an MOU, with all the state governments and many foreign firms like Accenture, Safran, and Ernst & Young. We procured the contract agreements from the under Right to Information Act. And that contract agreement reveals, although we were shared the truncated document and the page, there were many missing pages, and there was a page which mentioned annexure, but the annexure document was missing. But even the part which was shared with us, it was filed by former defense scientist Colonel Matthew Thomas. He had asked me to represent him in the Central Information Commission, and that document revealed that the data of all the Indians, present Indians and future Indians, all the legislators, judges, soldiers, all of their data is with these three companies, Accenture, Ernst & Young, and Safran, because they can keep this data for up to 7 years. In electronic age, data kept for even 7 minutes is enough because it is lost forever. So this biggest data transfer has happened and it is happening in India in real time, and there is documentary evidence to show that the data transfer is happening. So this happened through contract agreement between 2010 and 11. All the state governments have signed that MOUs for implementing the Aadhaar program. Although most of the states and there were many protests about NPR, but the general awareness about both NPR and Aadhaar remains meager. Very few people know that both the projects are one and the same. Moving further, there is another date which is very important. During Tony Blair years in UK, there was a national ID project launched by Tony Blair government, the Labour Party government in UK. And the opposition parties in UK, both the Liberal Party, a coalition of the opposition parties, Liberal Party and Conservative Party in UK, promised during their electoral campaign that when they will come to power, they will destroy this surveillance project. And when they came to power, they commissioned a study by London School of Economics. The London School of Economics conducted a study and argued that centralized online databases are the most insecure databases imaginable. Subsequent to that finding, subsequent to the recommendation of the LSE, London School of Economics study, the Nick Clegg David Cameron government abandoned the project, abandoned the national ID project, which is similar to the Aadhaar UID project. The, the reason this is relevant is because when the idea of UID number, Aadhaar number was presented in India, the UK example was cited by the proponents. In fact, there are documentary evidence and papers which say that if UK can have an ID, national ID, India can have it. But after UK abandoned it, there is a deafening silence in India as to why UK abandoned it. What is poisonous in UK for citizens' liberties is poisonous for India. The similar project has been abandoned not only in UK but in Australia, in China, in France, in Philippines. It has been abandoned. This project is actually part of a World Bank Transform initiative, which was launched in April 2010 in partnership with 5 transnational corporations: IBM, Gemalto, Pfizer, Intel, Microsoft, and 2 national governments, France and South Korea. They wanted to converge private sector economy, public sector economy, and citizen sector economy. This is actually part of a universal convergence project which is unfolding. So I will move further. Even in US, during the Democratic Party election campaign, Obama had promised that he will abandon the ID project, which was based on radio frequency identification, which is also a biometric data, which is voice based. They had the IBM, the Obama campaign and the Democratic Party had promised that when they come to power, they will stop the implementation of their project. And when Obama came to power, Democratic Party government over there stopped its implementation. When Trump came to power, he started its implementation. When now Biden administration is there, it has stopped its implementation. So it is clear that this project, this kind of surveillance identification, automatic identification technology project does not enjoy bipartisan support, be it in UK, USA, or in India. But in recent times, what has happened is that you are aware that this entire project was challenged in the Supreme Court of India. And I will briefly mention the case details, and I will cover other aspects of it during question answer session. That in 2012, before 2010, how did the citizen liberties groups start the campaign against this mass surveillance project, which is a which is an authoritarian project, which believes in unlimited surveillance, which believes in 360-degree surveillance of citizens of present generation and future generations without any exception. When a case was filed, before the case was filed, 17 eminent citizens issued a statement of concern demanding a stoppage of this surveillance project. And those 17 eminent citizens included Justice V.R. Krishna here, Professor Romila Thapar, civil liberties lawyer K.G. Kandabiran, Professor Uma Chakravarti, like Professor Upendra Bakshi, Justice A.P. Shah. All these eminent citizens argued against implementation of such project. This is also important one thing, that in 2003, when the Italian philosopher Giorgio Agamben was asked to give biometrics at one of the US airports while he was on the way to a US university to deliver lecture. He left the lecture and returned to his country and wrote an article which was responded by several European governments. In his article, Giorgio Agamben, the author of on the state of exception, he said in his author, I think he's in his 90s, Giorgio Agamben said that this demand for biometric data at the airport is an extension of the concentration camp order. Today, he said it in 2003. In his article, he made a prophecy. He predicted that today what is being demanded at an airport will be demanded in every aspect of human life and human activity. His prophecy, his prediction has come true. what is unfolding is, and we have witnessed in the Supreme Court, that when the matter was heard and the case commenced in 2012, it was in 2015 that the government of India said that citizens of India do not have a fundamental right to privacy. The argument was that from the citizen side, the argument was that government is entitled to its doubt. Government should not have been allowed to plant that doubt in the minds of the judges, but somehow they persuaded the judges, and the judges set up a 9-judge constitution bench to examine whether or not right to privacy is a fundamental right. And subsequently, in August 2017, the 9-judge constitution bench unanimously concluded, they recognized that it is not government of India which gives right to fundamental right. It is Constitution of India which recognizes pre-existing natural rights like right to privacy as part of right to life. And they concluded that the government of India and the proponents of Aadhaar, who argued till the last moment that right to privacy is not a fundamental right, they were proven wrong. The proponents of Aadhaar remain enemies of right to privacy. They have remained enemies of privacy consistently since the inception of this surveillance project. This totalitarian project is unfolding. In 2018, the 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court, a constitution bench again, the current Chief Justice of India, Justice Dr. D.Y. Chandrachud, concluded that Aadhaar Act is a fraud on the Constitution. And he subsequently repeated his argument as part of another 5-judge bench in November 2019, which is the last order on the matter of Aadhaar Act. And he has referred, that bench of 5 judges have referred the matter to a 7-judge bench, which is yet to be constituted. So as of now, the last judgment of the Supreme Court of India says that the constitutionality of Aadhaar Act is to be decided by a larger bench of 7 judges. Before concluding, I'm leaving a lot of things for the question answer session. I'm reminded of, these days it may not be fashionable, but it is quite insightful, that there was a book authored in 1867, and that book said that centralization of resources is at the core of capitalism. It says that capitalism's tendency is always towards centralization, which ultimately overpowers the centrifugal forces of competition. This book was Capital, and it's the decentralization of databases, the centralization of data, the convergence of databases have lethal consequences for the relationship between citizen and the state. It has consequences for the nature of government. Before I conclude, I would say that right now what is happening is that there is a national judicial data grid which is unfolding, which will lead to an extinction of separation of power between the executive, judiciary, and the legislature. And the 1748 book by Montesquieu, The Spirit of Laws, said that if unlimited government is to be resisted, separation of power has to be ensured. Databases like NPR, Aadhaar database, they are linking with electoral database, they are linking with census database, they are linking with the database of birth and registration, they are linking with every imaginable database, actually is an invitation for unlimited government. You know, and this is my concluding observation, you know that the census was due in 2021. It is 2023, and the census was the biggest public information infrastructure, most valuable public infrastructure for public policy, is not being conducted. It is unlikely to be conducted before 2024. Why it is not being conducted? It is not being conducted because Aadhaar is unending census, and Aadhaar is based on not only demographic data but also biometric data. It will also end up marrying metadata, and I would make some observation about metadata, and, and with that I will conclude. Metadata is that data which anybody and everybody who uses mobile phone or computer or any online gadget, they keep on revealing their location. They keep on revealing the identity of people who are in conversation. Parliamentary Standing Committee of Information Technology presented a report in February 2014, and in that report, they asked the Secretary of the Department of Electronics and Information Technology, Mr. J. Satyanarayana, as to why Government of India is not asking US government, why the US agencies are putting our ministers, prime ministers under surveillance. The secretary then, who subsequently became the chairman of the Unique Identification Authority of India, the secretary informed the parliamentary committee that the government has asked the US government at the highest level, meaning they have asked the president himself, as to why ministers, prime minister, presidents, judges, and everybody in India is subject to surveillance by US agencies. So they asked the secretary what was the response. The secretary said that the US government responded saying that they are only collecting metadata. The Parliamentary Standing Committee, in its naivety, said that if they collect more than metadata, it will be considered intolerable. The fact is that metadata reveals all the minute details, all the personal sensitive information. When aggregated, it reveals more than what is revealed, consciously revealed. It seems that our policymakers and the proponents of Aadhaar and NPR, they have not learned from the Urdu poet who said, "खत का मजमून भाप लेते हैं लिफाफा देखकर." The content of the letter is understood by looking at the letter, at the envelope of the letter. That metadata is that envelope, and it is being collected without the consent. There is a compelling reason to stop automatic revelation of individuals' locations. Otherwise, the natural rights of human beings will become a story of the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gopal. I think it was a very wonderful way of leading us to understand uh, the politics behind numbers. So we also know that we are told numbers hide more than they reveal, and what are the forces behind the numbers is something that we always we don't understand. So I think now let me I can since we are a few people, about 25 of us, those of you can open up your videos and we can have a brief discussion. So let me just summarize what the few takeaways that I have got. So you have very wonderfully said about the historically, graphing the whole census, also the power behind the manipulations and the private and the corporate, the convergence, in the name of convergence, the power convergence, how this whole project can be used against citizens. All those are I'm saying huge game with the example of Aadhaar you have brought it before us. That's, I think, quite revealing for us to understand what lies behind the numbers. we have always held different ideas of the state. We know the sovereign state, the secular state, republic, we know authoritarian state. So now we have added a new name, new word today called the database state. And all these different characteristics of the state, you have brought into the idea of database, how it could be dictatorial, how it also could be genocidal, how it can engineer programs for which are anti-citizens, number of those things. I think that linking to the state power and various how the data is used, you have basically very in a very interesting way you have brought it together. Yeah, I think others, we all now, as we have some close conversation, let me begin with two questions that I have, so that then meanwhile others can join in. The question is, we know that the state has always been powerful. If wanted to hunt down, it could do it in 1800s, it could do it in 1900s. And also the data sets or the census that we are saying about also is a tool of power in the hand of the state. The question is, now what has changed with this with the again the same exercise that is happening again and again in different ways? What has changed? Secondly, what are its implications to the citizens by and large? Because we know that now we have a citizenry which is more than happy to hand over even before asking. Like we will, the Instagram and the WhatsApps are all, and Facebooks, even the state doesn't say. We have already become co-opted to say more than what we do to anybody in the public state. So my question is, in this sense, with this Aadhaar and others, what has changed, and what would be the consequences to the public and to the citizens? This is one. Secondly, with is this that state will do surveillance on us, or we will be under surveillance eternally? Is it new today? Because state always put our people under surveillance at different points in time, to the police force, to the military, armed force, all that, and it has got enough wherewithal to hunt down citizens. So are our fears of being under surveillance, and that we will be tracked and we will be revealing to the state what we do, is it solely, is it a kind of a unfounded kind of a assumption, or if what are the possible ways that this will be, helping in kind of a let's say defragmentation of citizenry, citizens power, civil society? These are my two questions to open up the discussion, and I will ask others to join in, and we can take it forward from there. So friends, let us open this. The floor is now open. Those of you can open up your videos. That's great, fine and good. You can raise your hands if you want to speak to, or you can put your questions in the chat box. Thank you. Okay, yeah, Gopal, you can start. Maybe then,
Okay.
meanwhile, others must be formulating their questions. We can take it from there. Yes, I have just started a few to break the silence.
Okay. So before I respond to questions from Sambhavi and Vyom, let me respond to the observations you made about a state always doing surveillance. Actually, a state does take surveillance. There has never been a state, there has never been an empire, there has never been a kingdom which has not undertaken surveillance. There are legitimate needs of state for undertaking surveillance, but that is on a specific person to person, case to case basis. When it suspects somebody to be doing something against the state, against the society, it makes a case for subjecting that person under surveillance. in this case, in the case of these big databases, it is not about suspecting one person or two persons or 10 persons. It is about suspecting the entire human population. This is about subjecting the entire human population to surveillance. This is unprecedented. No, no freedom-loving society will accept this. And the real problem is not surveillance per se. The real problem is indiscriminate surveillance. In fact, there was a similar identification exercise undertaken in UK, and the European Court of Human Rights unanimously decided against indiscriminate collection of data. There has to be limited purpose for data collected, and the purpose for which data is collected, it should not be used for any other purpose. This purpose limitation is recognized in the Supreme Court's order on right to privacy as well. If you collect data for one thing and you start using it for military purposes, for silencing dissidents, for marginalizing opposition parties, I think if indiscriminate surveillance is permitted, there will be no dissenting voices. There will be no opposition parties. So what is being contested is not surveillance in the limited sense, is this unlimited surveillance, which is for 360-degree, which is 360-degree surveillance, which is deeply problematic, and no civilized society can give consent to it. With regard to Sambhavi's question, if the census remains connected to NPR in law and considering that NPR is one and the same as a nationwide NRC, given the vast scope for disenfranchisement from the NRC, is it then crucial to demand legally delinking census from the NPR? No, it is definitely required that census be linked from NPR, and NPR and Aadhaar is one and the same. So there has to be, in fact, one should learn from the recommendations of the study conducted by London School of Economics. What are their recommendations? In fact, Professor Edgar Whitley, one of the authors of that LSE report, came to Delhi, and we had invited him in JNU. There was a midnight meeting in Tapti hostel, if I recollect right. And somebody had posed this question to him, to Professor Edgar Whitley, that if I have nothing to hide, why to fear? And he said that he had two answers, one a humorous answer and the other one a very serious one. His humorous response was that if you have nothing to hide, you are a very boring person. And he would not like to sit next to anybody who says that he has nothing to hide. But the serious question, serious response, if I can recollect right, was that in UK, the title of the topic, the title of the my talk, database state, is actually taken from a report which was released in UK, which is titled Database State. In UK, this adage of Goebbels, the propaganda minister of Germany, was given a public burial when the entire children database of UK was leaked. It was lost. And it was said that if you trust the state with children's database or the database of all these citizens of the present generation and future generations, then actually you are surrendering it not only to the state actors, you are surrendering it to also the non-state actors, because the cloud is not under the control of a state actor. Cloud, computing cloud is not, we should decode, decipher the meaning of cloud. It simply means somebody else's computer. It simply means the computer of USA. The entire online database of Aadhaar is under US jurisdiction. And the companies like Accenture, Safran, Ernst and Young have real-time data of our armed forces, of our judges. Anybody who wants the contract agreements, I will be happy, more than happy to share that contract agreement. It was filed in the Supreme Court, and it was current Chief Justice, who took note of it. And they said that the big tech companies are proceeding at a very faster pace, and the law making is not able to keep pace with the technological developments. So there are regular unmet regulatory challenges that puts our privacy or also national security in jeopardy. With regard to Vyom's
Yeah, there's a
question,
second question, yes.
yeah,
Uh, the
one
sinister
is
role of a centralized database like Aadhaar is yet far away from public discourse. For people, it sounds like a conspiracy theory. Can you explain how can Aadhaar data be used against particular community? Yeah, this is the question.
with regard to how data census Aadhaar data means unending census data. There will never be a time when you will not continue to share. It will be a 24 into 7 throughout your life. You will be sharing your biometric data, your demographic data, and your metadata, which includes, which communicates behavioral data as well. This is actually, to put it in a mild way, actually, this is on one level required for data monetization. At another level, it is required by state actors and non-state actors for social control. The example of IBM's role shows how citizens can be profiled. In fact, the Supreme Court judgment on privacy refers to metadata repeatedly. It refers to in the consequences of profiling for infinite times. These are not harmful things. Another thing is that whatever I have stated, whatever the opponents have stated, we are drawing from the first document is a statement of concern released by Professor Upendra Bakshi, released by Professor Uma Chakrabarti, by Justice V.R. Krishna. The first document to refer to before reaching any conclusion is the statement of concern released in September 2010. The second document to refer to is the report of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance presented to Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha in 2011. The third document to refer to is the 1448 page long judgment on Aadhaar, and especially the dissenting order of Justice Chandrachud. Also refer to the privacy judgments of 547 page long judgment on right to privacy. Refer to these documents because these are documents which will decide awareness about it, will decide whether there will be informed response from the citizenry when there are assaults on the rights of the people. I think I have
Yeah,
responded.
there's
If
a
there are other
related
questions.
question. There's a related question to Aadhaar. I'll come to the previous question of Prashant. Is enrolling for Aadhaar UID is voluntary? What does the law say? And this is Shweta's question.
Shweta's question is very important. I have the Aadhaar Act near me, just in front of me, and there is the enrollment form in it, which says at the very top, first line of the enrollment form. And this is also very important for everybody and everybody who has been taken for a ride to get Aadhaar enrollment done. Refer to the enrollment form. It is available on the website. Refer to the bare act of it. The first sentence of the enrollment form says it is free and voluntary. What does it mean? It means the first sentence, this is the enrollment form. What is the first sentence? It says Aadhaar enrollment is free and voluntary. Who is eligible to have Aadhaar? Anybody, be it from Honolulu or Timbuktu. If he has lived in India for 182 days prior to enrollment, he can get his Aadhaar number made. Why should citizen entitlements be made condition precedent on having, having you oneself identified biometrically profiled? Citizens entitlements cannot be linked to Aadhaar because citizens Aadhaar number is not a proof of citizenship. Anybody who has Aadhaar, the receipt of the Aadhaar, which is incorrectly and wrongly called card. It is not a card. There is a very important distinction between card and this Aadhaar number. This unique identification number is, its brand name is Aadhaar. Like Vanaspati ghee has a brand name called Dalda. In the same way, unique identification number has a brand name called Aadhaar, which is named after Nandan Nilekani's NGO called Aadhaar Trust. So although there was a process initiated that he is asking for brand names, but coincidentally that selection process ended up selecting the name of his NGO, Aadhaar. But why there is a distinction? Aadhaar number is an identifier. It alters the relationship between the state and the citizen. It turns you into a subject of a database state. If the state says you are not what you are claiming to be, you are not that. This is causing civil deaths and real deaths and starvation deaths in Jharkhand, in Telangana, in Rajasthan, which is neither in the Aadhaar Act nor in the Income Tax Act, and there is no other act. And I have studied every possible document with every possible document available in public domain. There is no act which says Aadhaar is mandatory. Aadhaar enrollment is mandatory. They are indulging in behavior modification. Aadhaar is not mandatory. Most recently, Supreme Court says it few days back, it is not mandatory to link it with voter ID. Delhi High Court said it is not mandatory to link it with any school admission, college admission. In fact, just refer to Section 7 of the Aadhaar Act. It makes it clear that when you do not have Aadhaar, you can use any alternative ID. Refer to Section 7 of the Aadhaar Act. The fact remains that even now, there is another very important thing which I missed out, was that in the original Aadhaar Act 2016, there was a Section 57. And if you want to trust the state with that Section 57, you are welcome to trust it. Section 57 said all the data collected of the residents of India can be shared with any private individual or body corporate or anybody. Supreme Court of India in its Aadhaar judgment declared that section to be unconstitutional. Now let me ask you, all the MOUs which state governments have signed, they have ignored the Supreme Court judgment. All the MOUs which the state government has signed and the political parties, even from the opposition parties, they have signed. They have ignored the fact that Section 57 has been deleted from this act. So will MOU remain as it is? Will it be business as usual? What will be the implication of deletion of such a unconstitutional and fraudulent provision in the Aadhaar Act? Supreme Court declared it unconstitutional, and subsequently government introduced an amendment to delete the Section 57 from the Aadhaar Act. This act has Section 57, and you see in front of it, it is written, it is deleted. All the actions of Government of India and state governments till the date it was deleted are suspect. They transfer the data to private entities. The MOUs remain unchanged. So Supreme Court order, verdict, this amendment law, all this is being violated. So there is for every observation I have made, I will be happy to share reference documents, which are all official documents with you, so that you can draw your own inference about it. But to begin with, kindly read the first document you touched with regard to Aadhaar, and that is the Aadhaar enrollment form.
Thank you. So we have two questions by Prashant. So where is it? Yes, one is about in continuation. No, Prashant, you have three. Can you just summarize? You have first question on caste census. caste census data can be conveniently used by state for various vested purposes. Why state is reluctant to collect it? This is number one. The second question is about any state, irrespective of its nature, would like to have data of its subjects. Is it possible to safeguard data in the age of digitalization and globalization today? There are two questions. One is on caste census and on the scope of state's power and whether it can stop. And the third question is uh, yeah, in continuation of above, I saw on Facebook someone selling leads of 1.2 billion for business needs. Okay, around these two questions, Amitabh, I'll come to you. Yeah.
One is that there will never be a time when data collection will not happen. Data collection has happened, will happen, but it must happen in a legitimate manner and with a purpose limitation on a need to know basis. And the approach paper of Government of India on right to privacy says that data is safe when it is kept in decentralized silos. The government of government in Russia, in China, they have ensured the safety and security of their data. There is a data nationalism at work. We cannot access the data of USA or European countries, but our data is accessed. Right now there are talks going on in WTO about data sharing. All the developing countries, including India, are rightly opposing free flow of data to the richer countries, to US and its allies. They are rightly confronting it. But the government of India is taking a contradictory position. At the WTO level, in the talks, it is joining African nations and others and China in resisting, control over data flow, in resisting transfer of data. But within the state, domestically, it is implementing such projects which are allowing data transfer to happen. The saddest part and the tragic part is we are giving data and we are also giving money for every enrollment. The cost, the contract agreements revealed, every enrollment costs rupees 300, 2 rupees 75 paisa. If we multiply 140 crores Indian citizens with 2 rupees 75 paisa, that much amount is going to the biometric technology companies like Accenture, Safran, and Ernst & Young. And this is not one time cost. Each time you use Aadhaar or NPR, this money gets transferred to them because these companies are providing data biometric technology services, but they have not transferred the technology. So this is this project is ensuring guaranteed revenue flow for all times to come for these companies. And under the US Patriot Act, all this data is available with the US government and US agencies.
Okay, thank you for that. So, Amitabh, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? Yes. Good to see you also. Yes.
Thanks, Gopal, for such a wonderful deliberations. And it's always nice to listen to you, listen to your emphatic arguments and passion, motivation, and congrats again, once again. So I just one thing is that, I mean, you mentioned about the involvement of World Bank and transnational actors in institutionalizing this kind of formative structure of data management or database. So if you repeat that, because this connection was is not very clear to me, that how the World Bank as well as other actors through market So is it a kind of another form of state capture? One. And second is that I am just thinking that whether this large or meta data could be a threat to the sovereignty for India at some point of time. Thank you again for a very, very informative and revealing lecture. Thanks again.
Thank you for your question. And the first, before I proceed, I did not explain properly what metadata is. Metadata is data about data. It is data that is made by data, a cluster of tags and markers that allow data to be useful. Metadata is activity data, all the records of all the things you do on your devices and all the things your devices do on their own is metadata. Metadata includes technical data, business data, process data. It is not a benign abstraction. It is the very essence of content. Metadata is very serious. Metadata is generated involuntarily and automatically. Control is knowingly produced. Control is knowingly. Metadata is collected, stored, and analyzed by machine, made by machine without your on our participation. There is no consent taken with metadata collection. Metadata makes you totally naked, transparent to the government. There is a commodity, there is a commonality between nuclear weapons and cyber surveillance when it comes to the concepts of proliferation and disarmament. The Supreme Court judgment on privacy makes 121 references to metadata. There is a reason why it is repeatedly mentioned, but the state and the citizenry and the political parties are not alert, they are not arrived. Coming to the question with regard to World Bank, thank you for your question because there were some aspects which I wanted to elaborate, which I missed out. World Bank, in its official history, you know, the World Bank group has many institutions. One of them is International Monetary Fund. Their official history is available on their website. And they very honestly communicate in their official history. And the official history is titled The Silent Revolution, the IMF years between 1979 and 1989. Although it doesn't cover the current period, it reveals its own character. This official history of IMF, a World Bank Group institution, says surveillance is the central pillar of the bank, including military surveillance. With regard to, specifically with regard to surveillance, there is a discussion in the book where a World Bank official is saying that no state will voluntarily agree to subject itself to surveillance because surveillance sounds terrible. So World Bank official says in the official report, we have to make an effort to ensure that surveillance sounds like cooperation, consultation, inclusion. It should be made to sound benign. Aadhaar Act, through its financial inclusion, has made surveillance benign. This is World Bank language succeeding. And we know through our research on World Bank literature that World Bank is not a bank of money. It is a bank of language. They have captured the imagination and narrative of the policy makers. With specific reference to this project, World Bank launched an initiative called World Bank E-Transform Initiative in April 2010. And it was launched in Washington in the presence of finance ministers of 14 developing countries and communication ministers of 14 developing countries. Our finance minister and communication ministers, Pranab Mukherjee and A. Raja, were present when it was launched. It was launched in partnership with 5 transnational corporations. The details are available on the World Bank website. Why it was launched? I went through the proceedings of this initiative. The proceedings said, it has been made to sound herbivorous. The proceedings say that e-governance has failed in developing countries. Why it has failed? Its diagnosis says it has failed because three economies are running parallelly: private sector economy, public sector economy, and citizen sector economy. They said as long as they operate parallelly, e-governance cannot succeed. Therefore, they suggested, they launched the e-transform initiative to converge all the three economies. After convergence, which sector will remain? To my mind, it will be the commercial sector. This also reminds me of a very important document by the CEO of a very important data initiative, the CEO of National Intelligence Grid, Captain Raghu Raman. Before he joined as CEO of the National Intelligence Grid, he was the chairman of the Safety Security Committee of the Bombay Chambers of Chambers of Commerce and Industry. And while working there, he wrote a paper which is titled "A Nation of Numb People." It will in Hindi it will reveal its meaning more clearly. मंद बुद्धि लोगों का देश, a nation of numb people. And in that he says, a national intelligence grid and UID Aadhaar project are linked. This is disclosed in ASOCHAM report and FICCI reports. We have copies of those reports. This was by design part of it. It was good that the many state governments opposed it, and national intelligence grid could not proceed as was desired then, but it is proceeding now through various convergence initiative of sister databases. So I think when the World Bank e-transform initiative was launched, the idea was to ensure that every resident in the country has e-identity, which is UID. So I will not dwell much on it. So this is with regard to sovereignty, it is definitely affected because most of our activities, most of our data is online, and it is under the control of, in fact, the blackout in Venezuela reveals that when electricity grid is connected to data grids or digital technologies, they can be, it can be a point of attack by state actors and non-state actors. So there are other aspects of it. It creates an information asymmetry, and we become, very unequal in terms of our knowing, state of knowing. Uh, uh, that creates data asymmetry.
Thank you, Gopal. I too would like to come back to Shambhavi's question, which was asked earlier about NRC has shown the potential to do disenfranchise citizens in different ways, and whether it is time to de-link NPR and NRC. So where do we stand legally as of today? I'm saying, is it a finished closed matter, or you said something is in the domain of constitutional court as of now? So what is the what is the position as of now in terms of civil society arguing for delinking and the state putting it all together? Just a clarificatory question from there. And the second one, you said you will come back to IBM things after referring to their role in the Nazi Holocaust, Jews Holocaust, to the second part. So that was, I think, just want to remind if you have not covered. Yeah, two questions. Others, please, if anyone has any compelling question, please, you can now also, speak up, and we can continue if there is a general interest in the discussion. Yes.
With regard to NPR and Aadhaar, the legal position is that Aadhaar bill was not a money bill. the Council of State Rajya Sabha said it categorically that it is not a money bill. It was challenged, it has been challenged in the Supreme Court as a matter is pending before and yet to be constituted 7-judge bench. It was mentioned before the Chief Justice bench by Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi in May 2023, and the Chief Justice said that he has been thinking about setting up the Constitution bench. But the Supreme Court Chief Justices have been thinking about setting it up since November 2019. Oh, while the data transfer is happening, in fact, Justice Chandrachud knows it that the data transfer is happening. His 3 orders, in fact, the order as part of 9-judge bench, he realized the threat from this technology. As part of Aadhaar bench, he declared it as a fraud on the Constitution. As part of another 5-judge bench in the Roser Matthew versus South India Bank Limited case on 13 November 2019, that bench referred it to a 7-judge bench. And now Chief Justice is seized with the matter. It will be decided. But the fact is that as citizens, as people and scholars in academia, will poison become poisonous on the day Supreme Court will decide it to be poisonous? Or will it be poisonous prior to the declaration by the Supreme Court? The 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court, the last order on the Aadhaar Act says Aadhaar Act is poisonous. But it said because of judicial discipline, 7-judge bench will declare it. What are enlightened citizens required to do? They will wait for the opposition party, the ruling party, the citizens. What are they waiting for? That last order says it delegitimizes Aadhaar Act. Deletion of Section 57 from Aadhaar Act, it makes it, it delegitimizes Aadhaar Act. And there is hardly a week in which we do not realize that Aadhaar project is a tried, tested, failed project. Every day there is leakage. In fact, the entire database has been leaked out. We know it. When the vaccine data based on Aadhaar identification, that vaccine data, COVID vaccine data, all the people in India who got themselves vaccinated, their data was leaked out. There is something revealing came out. R.S. Sharma, who was the Director General of Unique Identification Authority of India, while taking COVID vaccine, did not disclose his Aadhaar number. He expected all the citizens of India to disclose Aadhaar number. He promoted it as Chief Secretary of Jharkhand. He promoted it also as a tri-chairman. He promoted it as a DG of the Aadhaar number. He's promoting it in the name of Health ID as the chairman of the National Health Authority. But when it comes to getting himself vaccinated, he did not disclose his Aadhaar number. He disclosed his passport number. He is giving a message to citizens: don't trust Aadhaar. Don't trust this project. It is the most untrusty, the most vulnerable database project in the world. With regard to IBM, IBM was involved in the, in causing Holocaust. Nobody has contested it till date. That IBM contested. They did not contest it when Edwin Black approached the IBM. The IBM is involved in Aadhaar project as well through contracts. IBM's motto is 360-degree surveillance. And as chairman of the Unique Identification Authority of India, J. Satyanarayana gave a presentation he gave a presentation in Andhra Pradesh, and he gave a presentation before Cabinet Secretariat. For a brief period, that presentation was uploaded on the website of the Cabinet Secretariat. I have a copy of that. Subsequently, they removed that presentation. IBM's motto is 360-degree surveillance. UIDI is Aadhaar project proponents' motto is 360-degree surveillance. The marriage of purpose is clearly visible. In fact, one of the ex-employees, which is quite a strange thing, ex-employees of IBM became a volunteer with unique identification hospital of India, and he became the chief architect of the UIDA. Another very alarming and insensitive thing with regard to Aadhaar is that the Biometrics Standard Committee came out with a report on biometrics in India, and it said that 15% of Indian population does not have fingerprints. They are excluded. Their civil death is being caused. Their natural death is being caused. 15% of Indian population means population of some countries. This is an inhuman anti-citizen project. And like Obama, like the opposition parties in UK and opposition party in US, the opposition parties in India who have realized that it is a political weapon, they also should realize it is a military weapon. They should make firm commitment. Some political parties have said that it should be to stop. The Assembly of West Bengal Assembly has passed a unanimous resolution questioning Aadhaar to be a project of exclusion. Other state governments, other state assemblies also need to come forward. Take note of the Supreme Court order. Take note of the deletion of Section 57, and also unsign all the MOUs and revise it in the light of the Supreme Court judgment and the amendment in the Aadhaar Act. It cannot be business as usual. And our fellow citizens are dying. They are dying of starvation. There has to be a human response. And any party, any coalition which claims to be pro people cannot afford to, be silent about the unconstitutionality, illegitimacy of Aadhaar project and related projects like Aadhaar, like NPR, Health ID, Family ID, and other schemes. In fact, World Bank thing, I'm reminded, World Bank had shared a data which was cited by many people, also by government officials and ministers, that it has led to savings. These many, billions have been saved because of Aadhaar. When one examines that data, one finds that it is not a claim about savings. It is a claim about that much of transaction. The transaction was presented, in fact, World Bank considered it, but by then the propaganda had amplified, the message had gone, even they continue to repeat the propaganda about it being a cause of savings. It was not a savings data, it was a transaction data which was presented as a savings data. Anybody who claims that Aadhaar causes saving, they have to do one thing. And we have been asking it since 2010. I think Aadhaar project is the only project in India whose total estimated budget has not been disclosed till date. Only annual expenditure is disclosed. Total estimated budget is not disclosed. Unless the total expenditure is disclosed, total estimated budget is disclosed, how do you account for savings? Disclose the total estimated budget and then talk about savings. Then we'll be able to make correct assessment of it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Since we are coming close to the, I'm saying we are a little bit overshooting on time, your brief responses to these three questions, Indra, I'll come to you. One is about the, is it a private player's exploit, or, of what comes across through your talk? And Anita Rampal's two questions on getting Aadhaar card and, data collected on children to disburse the entitlements, uniforms, etc. Similarly, Delhi government has collected family members' personal data as well for the children. So this is something, a brief response to this. And one more, do we have any other option? Of course, Sagar's question. So with these brief responses to you, then I'll hand over it to Indira. Indira, do you have a question or you want to conclude?
No, I think they are related questions, really, actually. So the
Okay.
questions I had in mind have been posed.
Okay.
Yeah, we see similar issues, I think, even in health entitlements under the insurance. Health insurance also, if they don't have their Aadhaar and all, do they get their entitlements is a problem. See,
Okay.
and the Aadhaar card, Gopal says, आधार हर वो आम आदमी का अधिकार बना दिया गया है, so really what options do we have? Yeah,
Correct.
so my
Okay.
questions are here in this.
Right.
Thank you.
Gopal, if you can respond to these, and yeah, then Indira, you can take over.
I will respond to the first question, the last question by Indira first. I have the Aadhaar Act in front of me. This is Section 7 of Aadhaar Act. And I will read out the provision of Section 7. The central government, or as the case may be the state government, may, for the purpose of establishing identity of an individual as a condition for receipt of a subsidy, benefit or service for which the expenditure is incurred from or the part of the Consolidated Fund of India or the Consolidated Fund State, require that such individual undergo authentication or furnish proof of possession of Aadhaar number, or in the case of an individual to whom no Aadhaar number has been assigned, such individuals makes an application for enrollment. Provided that, and this is the most important, provided that if any Aadhaar number is not assigned to an individual, the individual shall be offered alternate and viable means of identification for delivery of the subsidy, benefit on service. For the delivery of subsidy, benefit on services. I will repeat, provided if an Aadhaar number is not assigned to an individual, the individual shall be offered alternate and viable means of identification for delivery of the subsidy, benefit or service. So there is no mandatoriness at all. One. Second, I have come across a report of the Parliamentary Committee on Subordinate Legislation, which shows that that report is titled confidential, but subsequently it is now in public domain. That report reveals that government is making rules contrary to act on many occasions with regard to many laws. So in that report there is a table, and in that table parent act is mentioned, rules made by government is mentioned, and then the remark is mentioned as to whether or not the rules are compliant with the act. Any rule which says Aadhaar is mandatory is contrary to the act, and act will prevail on rules and not rules will prevail on act. This has to be clear. And I'm reminded of a book by Ronald Dworkin, a jurist, who says, if you do not take your rights seriously, you do not take yourself seriously. So unless you defend your rights by citing these provisions, it will be difficult. You are actually surrendering. The other part, which is very important for the purpose of all the people who are dependent on ration cards for food entitlements, that the state governments have received a letter from, and I'm making a revelation, anybody who in any state who is aware that the state government is making it mandatory for accessing ration through ration cards, kindly get in touch with me. I will tell you the current legal situation. There is some misleading thing happening. Somebody is misleading. In one particular year, most likely in 2017, Government of India, Consumer Affairs and Food Distribution Ministry issued a circular saying that Aadhaar is mandatory for accessing ration. Because of hue and cry, they withdrew that circular. But mischievously, government is not citing the order circular which has been withdrawn. It is citing the earlier order and asking state governments to link ration cards with Aadhaar. They are using a withdrawn circular, and no state government official is carefully examining the final details of what is there, what was there in the previous notification, what was there in the subsequent notification. So somebody is at work, and in fact, Sagar had asked the question about private players. In fact, private players are the reason why Aadhaar project came. There was no reason. In fact, an RTI was filed as to how many people have had identity proofs prior to Aadhaar, and the response was 99 point something. People already had some form of identification, either voter ID or driving license or PAN or something. In fact, every time prior to arrival of Aadhaar, every time there was election commission used to come out with advertisements which said that if you do not have voter ID, you can use any of the other 14, 15 ID documents to identify yourself. So it shows that there were 15 identity documents prior to arrival of Aadhaar. Another thing with regard to Aadhaar is that we should resist calling it card, because then we do not recognize the subversive nature of the project. It is 12-digit number. Actually, it is 16-digit number. 4 numbers are hidden. 12 digits. These are 12 digits which identify. This is an identifier. It is not an identity proof of anything. Also, it is not even an identifier. Actually, it is an authenticator. What does it authenticate? It authenticates that the digital copy of your fingerprint matches with your original, biometric attribute, biological attribute. It's a authentication of a photocopy. Digital copy is also a photocopy. It's a picture of the biological attribute. So they are matching it with a picture, a static picture. And this reminds me of Henry Bergson. Henry Bergson, the Nobel laureate, who wrote his doctoral thesis on the data consciousness. He said that data is stationary and the reality is dynamic. Data never captures the real. It captures always the stationary. And it doesn't capture. Therefore, many people are excluded because no human body part is, it is always, some body part is always decaying. It is always changing. Also, the contract agreements reveal that the uniqueness of biometric data is a postulate. Uniqueness of biometric data is an assumption. And in fact, there have been many cases where same biometric was found in other people's hands. There are US cases, there are many cases. So with regard to private player, I will only say that in 2006, there was a task force constituted. The task force was called Task Force on Identity Management. It was headed by a professor of computer science from Jamia Millia Islamia, S.I. Hassan. That task force had all the private big tech players as members, including J. Satyanarayana, who later on became the chairman of the Unique Identification Authority of India. It was designed for guaranteed revenue flow to these companies. I think I have one question about Anita's question. Not only Delhi government, every state government is not applying its legal imagination. They should ask their legal department to go through the Aadhaar judgment, go through the amendments in the Aadhaar Act, and instead of blindly following the propaganda of the ID cartel, which wants everybody, there is a universal database of biometrically identified individuals, it is unfolding. So each state, each nation or citizens will have to contest it. UK citizens contested it, they won. USA citizens contested it, they won. In Philippines also, the Supreme Court had declared it as unconstitutional. The indiscriminate collection of data creates unlimited government. Unlimited government means not limited by Constitution of India.
Thank you, Dr. Gopal. It was, I think, so wonderful to hear you. And especially, we know we have got a sense of the politics and the manipulations and the fabrications and the movers behind this data. And yeah, I don't want to take too much time to summarize, but there's a lot of takeaways for us. Maybe we'll get back to you with some any additional information. And I know each chunk of this requires a great amount of deliberation. And thank you for answering all our questions. Over to you, Indra.
Yes, I will also not take much time. We've had a really very good meeting. Thanks, as Eddie pointed out, for a lot of nuances of this whole database project that is going on. It's very serious, and I think the challenge now is how do all of us as citizens, as you ended, I think it's ultimately up to the citizens, and probably we need to take this message, much further, and to understand that even the state governments actually are also seem to be with the central government, because they are also implementing it at the ground level. So I think the most important takeaway is to take your message. I mean, to have many more such meetings across the country, and finally, ultimately, it's always the citizens only. We can depend on our power only to change this. So, thank you very much, Gopal, for responding to all our queries also before the meeting, for coming, and to all our participants also who are here for patiently, uh, um, and patiently waiting, and also keeping the discussion very engaged with all the questions, all very valid questions also. So thank you all very much, and we hope to see you all and many more at our next lecture series also. So we'll close here
Yeah,
and
thanks.
break the
Thanks.
meeting.
Yes. Thank you,
Thanks,
Gopal. And
Gopal,
yeah, for the
once
time.
again.
And yeah, very
Thanks.
interesting. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Indra.
Interesting
Thank
talk.
you,
Yeah.
Dr. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Good having you. Yes.
Okay, Indira. So we close here now. Oh, good. Okay. All right.
Yes, we'll close. I will just see, keeping the chat and everything should be available.
Thanks,
Uh,
Gopal.
yes, right. So the recording and all, I think, should be available.
Mm-hmm.
We need to store it. I
Yeah,
think when we,
before you
Yeah, we were
finally
just
I'm saying close the meeting, just do that, save the chats and all that.
yes. So what I'll do is